Okay, so now we pose a very important question. What is better, Pulp Fiction or Jackie Brown? That's interesting. Both of these movies came out in the mid 90s. Well, Jackie Brown was a little bit closer to the later 90s, but 94 was Pulp Fiction. I believe Jackie Brown was just a few years later. And Pulp Fiction basically launched the career of Quentin Tarantino, as well as putting Samuel Jackson in the spotlight. He had been working for years prior to this, but this is really the movie that cemented him and really, really launched him. And it is also the movie that resurrected the career of Mr. John Travolta, of Grease and Saturday Night Fever fan, and Look Who's Talking, depending on how you roll. This is the also a movie that stars who was a big star at the time. The biggest star in this film was Bruce Willis. He was already established. He was pretty much at the peak of his career at this point, for the most part. I mean, he had had some misses. You know, Hudson Hawk had come out a few years prior, and he was like his buddy in arms, John Travolta. He had starred in all of the, well, not all of, the first two Look Who's Talking movies as the voice of the baby, of John Travolta's adopted son, who would wind up being his adopted son. So they knew each other from that. Those movies were not highly regarded. They did very well. You know, the first one did well enough to get a sequel, and then there was a third movie where they got rid of the talking baby aspect and replaced it with the talking dogs. Here I am talking about the Look Who's Talking franchise instead of these Tarantino films, but that's a part of its DNA. You know, you got Bruce Willis, who signed on. He originally wanted to play the Vincent Vega character, but a lot of actors wanted to play that role. And he wound up giving it to John Travolta. He just really wanted Travolta in the movie. So basically, he told Tarantino how much of a fan he was of Reservoir Dogs, how he and his buddy would get together and quote the film to each other, and they knew every line, and he was really excited to work on Tarantino's next movie, no matter what it was. Like, I want to sign on. He read the script, says, I want to play Vincent Vega. By that point, Tarantino had already promised the role to Travolta, who, as we talked about before, had turned down the George Clooney role in From Dusk Till Dawn, but said that he was really interested in Vincent Vega, and in Tarantino wanting to really work with him, gave him that role. So then he basically, long story short, wound up talking Bruce Willis into taking the Butch role, a role that he originally was not interested in at all. And he explained to him how he thought he would be perfect for it. And so he signed on for that, even though it was a much smaller part. I wouldn't say much smaller. This is kind of Pulp Fiction is kind of an ensemble piece. It's told in like an anthology format. A lot of people consider it an anthology film. It's all connected. It's an anthology film in the way that maybe like a Trick or Treat, that horror anthology from the 2010s. I think it was in the 2010s. Maybe it wasn't. Maybe it was before 2000. I can't remember. That movie was so long ago, we still don't have a sequel to it. Although there's supposedly a sequel coming now. I don't know. We'll see. I'll believe it when I see it. But yeah. In that, it's three separate stories, but all the stories are connected. They intersect. And this actually has even has like a wraparound of sorts. A wraparound that kind of acts like the third story, because it opens up where the movie is going to end. And you can consider the diner robbery as a wraparound. But anyway, the cast is amazing in this. You have Tim Roth, you have Amanda Plummer, people that were starring in a lot of movies, a lot of genre films, especially in the 90s, in the independent film scene as well. Tarantino had worked with Tim Roth before on Reservoir Dogs. I'm trying to think, like, who else in the movie had he worked? Well, Christopher Walken had been in the Tony Scott film True Romance, based on his script, that Tarantino was a big fan of. He usually is very critical of those, but he liked what Tony Scott did with it. And I think one of the reasons is because he respected Tony Scott so much as a filmmaker. He had stated that his favorite Scott film at the time was Revenge. I don't know if that's still the case, but he's a massive Tony Scott fan. So he was delighted when Tony Scott was going to direct his script, and he loved the results, with the exception of the ending, which it diverges from the ending in his script. In the original ending, the lead character Clarence dies, and Tony Scott wanted him to live. But they found a compromise. Now Tarantino actually is fond of that ending for the Tony Scott film, not for his script, but for the movie that Tony Scott made. He agrees that is probably the right ending. So anyway, that's Christopher Walken plays a gangster in that. He has the infamous watch up the ass scene in this Pulp Fiction. It's like a blip of a scene. It's like a cameo. Harvey Keitel pops up in one of the segments as the wolf, the cleaner of sorts, similar to his cleaner character in Point of No Return, starring Bridget Fonda, who Tarantino would work with in his next film, Jackie Brown, but less vicious, more intellectual. Less animalistic and like a killing machine. This guy's wears a suit. He's suave. He just knows how to handle shit. But he's not. But he doesn't get his hands dirty. Really, he watches as Vincent and Jules, played by Samuel L. Jackson, do all the dirty work and clean all the blood and the brains out of the back seat of the car after Marvin is shot in a shocking moment. After the car goes over the bump, even though they argue whether there was a bump or whether Vincent is just reckless with his gun. Harvey Keitel and Tim Roth, so it was a little mini Reservoir Dogs reunion. The cast is just extremely strong. No one had seen anything like this. Mainstream audiences hadn't seen a movie like this ever. So it just hit at the right time. And it just exploded. Everybody lost their minds. Everybody. It doesn't matter what age you were. Everywhere from kids to, teenagers to, elderly people. Everybody was just, on board with this movie. It's what is this movie? I can't say everybody, though. There were some people, I remember some people at the time did think it was stupid. I remember hearing that, it has no story. It has no point. What is this? This is just needlessly violent. I can't follow this. Nothing happens. It's just what? And maybe those people were expecting a typical Bruce Willis film. I don't really know, but it was definitely a very special beast at the time. This is one of the movies that launched my love of cinema, my true love of cinema. I loved movies before this. But this one kind of opened my mind to the possibilities of what a movie could be, what a story could be. I liked how he played with the structure of stories. I was so used to the linear structure in films. I had never seen a movie that messed with structure in the way that Pulp Fiction did. I mean, obviously, it had been done before. I had never seen those movies, though, when I saw this film originally. It was new. It was fresh. It was exciting. I remember sitting in the theater. It was also one of the first films where I really just experienced and grasped dark humor as a concept. And I sat in a theater filled with people because it was just showing after showing, everybody packed the houses for this movie, at least where I was at. And the messed up stuff that would happen on the screen, whether it be people getting shot in the car, just uproarious laughter. Blood-drenched faces and a dead guy in the back seat, and everyone is just cracking up. The dialogue, just the fact that everybody just got it. In the screenings that I went to, because I went to see this movie a couple times in the theater, everybody just got it. It's just when they got a couple of minutes to kill before they have to go kill the dudes in the apartment, and they walk down the hall and they continue their conversation about foot massages and everything they're talking about, and it's just the mundaneness of the conversation. Everyone was just laughing, and maybe some of it was an uncomfortable laughter, but I just got it that this is hilarious, this is funny. It's not the typical humor that you're used to. You're questioning why perhaps this should be funny, but it is, and everybody knew that it was, and everybody knew at the time what Tarantino was doing, what he wanted from them, and they laughed when he wanted them to laugh, and they gasped when he wanted them to gasp, and they were on the edge of their seat, like in the when Uma Thurman is ODing and Vincent has to stab her in the heart 3 times with the oh, that didn't look good, but with the syringe in the heart, and just the way it's edited and just composed, everything. The fact that it was a new beast in that it consisted of songs and unique music. There was no score. There were a lot of periods of silence, and when there wasn't silence, there was like a song playing. But I believe they call that diegetic music. I think that's what it's called. Diegetic, yeah. It's when the music is playing in the scene. It actually exists in the scene. It exists in the movie. It's not coming from some strange place that only the audience can hear, but it's actually existing in the environment of the film. And Tarantino, that's just he when he wasn't using that, he was playing a song that was for the audience, and the characters couldn't hear. But a lot of the times, it was music that was happening in the moment. And but it was obvious that this movie sounds like no other movie that I've seen, and everybody recognized this. It's like, wait, where's the orchestral score? Where's the music telling us how to feel in these moments? Like that scene with the syringe, that entire scene is dead quiet. There's no music in that scene, and it's especially effective when he lifts the syringe to plunge down, and you see the dripping, and it cuts to everybody's faces, and it's just dead quiet. Nobody knows what's going to happen. And the way that scene was edited and constructed is just amazing. It's terrific. And so yeah, the guy is a great conductor of cinema. He has a great understanding of movies and cinema because of his immense knowledge from all the movies that he watched in his days of being a fan, going to the theater, working at the video store and video archives. By the way, if you're not listening to the Video Archives podcast now, he has a podcast with his buddy and collaborator from back in the day, Roger Avery, who they just talk about movies every other week, and then when they're not on, they have an after show. But it's worth checking out. That's what always appealed to me about Tarantino, was his knowledge, and his ability to be his talent for being a raconteur, just like being able to talk about a movie that he saw, and the exuberance, just like the excitement and love. You could just hear the love in his voice and in the words that he chooses, and how expressive he is in his movements and his words, and just the way he goes about everything. That was my favorite thing. I think honestly, at the time, I don't even know, maybe even now, that's my favorite thing about him. I might like that more than the movies, even. But anyway, Pulp Fiction's a classic. I'm trying to think anything else to say about this. He worked on the film with his buddy Roger Avery, who he had frequently collaborated with to various degrees. I mean, it seemed to me like Tarantino was the writer. He was on these scripts. Like Roger Avery worked on True Romance with him, and I think he originally came up with the idea for Natural Born Killers or something. They were collaborating. It's like, we want to do something together. And I even heard that I think the way it goes is that he also was working on him with Reservoir Dogs, but in the end, Tarantino was the screenwriter, and I think that's how Pulp Fiction went. It's still unclear to me. No one's ever come out and say exactly how they. Because it says, like, story by Tarantino and Avery, but written by Tarantino, which is typically the way it went. But, like, what stories were Avery's, which were Tarantino's? In what way did Avery contribute, collaborate? How did they collaborate? What was the process like? I know they both got the Oscar because Pulp Fiction won the Oscar for screenplay, best screenplay that year, and they each got a statue. So they worked on it together. Tarantino, I actually think, is always at his best as a filmmaker, and even a writer when he has a collaborator. You could even say that his process in general, like just the way that he writes, the fact that he lifts from inspirations that he has, movies that he loves, all of his ideas come from somewhere else, that is a form of collaboration. So everything that he does is collaboration. When he's not collaborating, the less he's collaborating, the worse his movies will be. And I don't think any of his movies are bad, but I do think they have a tendency of getting bloated. And when there's not another mind in the room to reel him back, his movies started to change. They started to get a little long, little full of themselves. I don't know. Like, I don't want to say that because I'm sure he was always is equally full of himself as he's always been. But when Sally Menke sadly passed away, his editor, you did start to notice a change in his films. I just recently watched Django again, and I could see it. It's like, okay, so this movie doesn't really start until he's on his way to Candyland with Schultz. Not to say that you'd have to take the first half of the film away, but you could definitely edit that down. And there's some scenes you're like, what is this? Why is this in here? Why is this so long? Because there's some golden shit in Django, and then there's other stuff that's just like, kind of has you checking your watch, especially the second time around, third time around. His movies that he used to make, Dogs, Pulp Fiction, Jackie Brown, even the Kill Bill movies, those are films built to be rewatched till time indefinite. If I feel like watching a Tarantino film, I'm going to watch one of his first three, honestly. Those are the ones I'm going to put on. Those are the closest to perfect films that he's ever made, in my opinion. Everything else later on, it kind of got bloated. Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, there's a lot of driving. There's a lot of bloat in that movie. There's a lot of brilliance in that movie too. And it potentially might have his best ending ever. To see that movie with a crowd, oh man, in that last sequence, the range of emotions and sounds coming from a group of people in the audience when they watch that scene, the last, whatever it is, 15 minutes, I don't know, but it is something to behold, for sure.